Good morning, my name is Baylee Allison, and I'll be presenting my thesis topic on transgender athletes in women's sports. The reality of transgender athletes in women's sports has become one of the most discussed and debated topics in recent years. As societies become more accepting of gender diversity, questions surrounding fairness, competition, and the rights of transgender individuals in athletics have surfaced across various levels of sports. While many argue that transgender athletes should have the same opportunities to compete as their chosen gender, others raise concerns about potential advantages or disadvantages of transitioning in terms of physical performance. This complex issue touches on the intersection of gender identity, science, and sports culture. Imagine this. Your daughter qualifies for the regional state track meet, which has been a dream of hers since she started running. The meet was in Austin, Texas, where schools all across the United States come to compete for this coveted regional title. Your daughter, along with 2 other girls, qualified for this meet, but you, the parent, were not worried because your daughters had the fastest time. It is about 30 minutes before the race commences, so all the teams are stretching and preparing to run. As your excitement builds to watch your daughter, you get informed that there'll be a transgender athlete competing against her. This transgender athlete has had the fastest time in the girls' ranking, setting her up to win the regional title. When your daughter finds out that she's racing against a man, the panic sets in, but the time for the race has finally come. You are devastated that your little girl's dream is about to be crushed because a man wants to call himself a woman. The buzz sounds and the runners take off. The transgender athlete takes first place and your daughter takes second. As your frustration grows and you question how this could have ever happened, you get informed of the existing state laws which ensure every athlete's right to fair play. Does this scenario seem crazy? Leah Thompson is a name that stands out for her journey as an athlete. She began her athletic career at the University of Pennsylvania, where she initially competed on the men's team for 2 years before transitioning to the women's team in 2019 after starting hormone replacement therapy. Her transition and success on the women's team sparked significant attention and controversy as she became the very first transgender athlete to win an NCAA Division I championship in the women's division. Her victory on the women's team brought to life widespread debates about the inclusion of transgender athletes in sports. The reality of fair play refers to the principle of ensuring equal opportunities, justice, respecting competitive sports, emphasizing ethical behavior, non-discrimination, and sportsmanship. Gender identity is one's deeply felt sense of their own gender, which may or may not align with the sex they were assigned at birth, and can include identities such as male, female, both, neither, or somewhere along the gender spectrum. Title IX is a U.S. federal law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance, aiming to ensure equality in areas such as education, athletics, and employment. Transgender athletes are destroying sports, according to Linda Blade and Barbara Kay, authors of Unsporting: How Trans Activism and Science Denial Are Destroying Sports. Transgender athletes create danger, discrimination, and discord within traditionally held female sports. On June 16, 2020, many people captured a tweet from Fallon Fox, a male-born mixed martial arts fighter who now self-identifies and fights as a female. In her tweet, Fox bragged, "For the record, I knocked 2 women out. One woman's skull was fractured and the other not. And just so you know, I enjoyed it." Fox further revealed a disdain for feminists who talk transphobic nonsense. It's bliss, don't be mad. Ever since the transgender movement entered mainstream feminism in the 1970s, women who refer to themselves as gender-critical feminists have resisted having their personal spaces invaded, such as locker rooms, restrooms, and changing rooms. Trans activists speak of targeting those women. When they resist, they threaten them with baseball bats, guillotines, and forcible sex acts. Fox did in fact break the skull of an opponent, Tamika Brent, who later described her fight with Fox as being noticeably different from fighting biological females. Brent said, "Her grip was different. I could usually move around in the hold against other females, but couldn't move at all in Fox's hold." It is far past time to stop allowing a distortion of medical facts to infiltrate women's sports. Unchanged women will be in an increasingly dangerous situation. Of course, the hold that Fox had on Brent was different. Fox a male, Fox was born a male, and will forever be a male. Further down the road, another tweet launched another person's career. A video was posted on Twitter by a UK rapper, Zuby. Zuby's tweet said, "I keep hearing about how biological men don't have any physical strength advantage over women in 2019. So watch me destroy the British woman's deadlift record without even trying. P.S. I identified as the one while lifting the weight." At the end of the tweet, Zuby added an emoji showing laughter. As a joke, the tweet served as a useful purpose. It broke a taboo and finally made it possible to talk about the disturbing trend of self-identified males coming out victorious over women in sports. Transgender individuals should not, under any circumstance, participate in any sport if they do not identify as their gender assigned at birth. If a biological man self-identifies and plays as a woman, how is it fair for naturally born females to compete against and with them? If you are born a female, then you are female. If you are born a male, then you are male. There is no change, no surgery, no medicine, nothing that can alter this. A female is a human being born with XX chromosomes. A male is a human being born with XY chromosomes. DNA is a material found in almost all living organisms. Its main purpose is to carry out genetic information in chromosomes. Regardless of sexual orientation, there is no possible way to change chromosomes integrated in DNA. They are found in our cells, which are self-replicating. Even if a person were to medically change the genitalia with which they were born, it would not change anything on a cellular level. If you were to receive a DNA or chromosomal test, the results would reveal that person was assigned at birth. If you were born a female, then you are female. If you were born a male, you are a male. Matthew 19:4 states, "He which made them at the beginning made them male and female." President Donald Trump signed an executive order Wednesday, February 5, 2025, prohibiting transgender women and girls from competing in female sports. Schools were required to allow transgender students to access school sports teams in sex-segregated facilities that align with their gender identities. Trump's order will instead prevent students assigned male at birth from participating in girls' and women's sports. The radical left has waged an all-out campaign to erase the very concept of biological sex and replace it with a militant transgender ideology. Trump said from the podium at the White House with dozens of women and girls standing behind him, "With this executive order, the war on women's sports is over." On the first day of his presidency, Trump signed an order declaring that only two genders exist. On the 8th day, his education department announced it was opening an all-out investigation into the Denver School District over its all-gender bathroom. And on the 9th, he signed an executive order penalizing teachers who help students socially transition. Simply saying you're a female does not make you one. The world has been corrupted to think that it is okay for people to just switch genders. Matafa Alpha Kenny Lessa, an award-winning Samoan journalist and a former editor of Samoan Observer news groups, has had over 20 years' experience in news media. Lessa sought further investigation regarding athlete Laura Hubbard, a New Zealand transgender athlete. When Laura was younger, she went by the name Gavin Hubbard. Gavin Hubbard was a New Zealand men's champion and national record holder. At 34 years of age, with his performance plateauing, Gavin self-identified as Laurel in 2012 and has enjoyed success against other female athletes. It is imperative to remember why women's sports were created. They sought a safe space for female athletes to flourish and wanted to avoid the corruption they saw growing in men's sports. The idea of men and women competing against each other is wrong for multiple reasons, including physical strength. Matafa Alpha Kenny Lessa said, "It will be a tragedy of gigantic proportion if this sort of thing is allowed. We talk a lot about empowering women. This does not empower women. If anything, it is taking the power away from them." The intent and impact of Title IX must further be discussed. It was implemented to provide specific opportunities, protections, and to protect women and girls in schools. Before Title IX was enacted, very few American women and girls participated in sports. In the school year preceding this legislation, 1971 and 1972, only 7% of girls participated in sports. 42 years later, during the school year 2013 to 2014, more than 41% of girls engaged in sports. Former President Joe Biden has made a completely new interpretation of Title IX. After he was sworn in as president on January 20th, 2021, he signed a number of executive orders. Amongst the executive orders, one was called Executive Order on Preventing and Combating Discrimination on the Basics of Gender Identity or Sexual Orientation. So the question still remains, when it comes to sex-based rights versus gender identity rights in sports, is balancing of rights even possible? I say it's not. In sports, the principles of fairness and level playing field should trump the principle of social inclusion. In sports, therefore, sex-based rights must prevail over gender identity rights. Perhaps such a balance is possible in certain contexts as the workplace, the classroom, or the arts. Biology makes no one's difference in their ability as a lawyer, a teacher, etc., but it does make a difference to one's performance as a weightlifter, player, or runner. People can say they identify as the opposite gender, but according to biology, you are what you were born as. You cannot escape the biology behind it. Proponents of transgender athletes competing in sports would argue in favor of fair competition. In other words, they claim that denying a transgender athlete from competing with the gender they identify as would be denying their rights to fair play. However, true competition is men competing against men, women competing against women, old against old, and young against young. Allowing a transgender athlete to compete as a gender they identify as is completely disregarding their right to fair competition. How is it fair for a naturally born woman to compete against and normally lose against a naturally born man? The issue of transgender athletes competing in sports is undeniably complex and touches upon the basic principle of fairness, equality, and safety. The inherent physical differences between biological males and females cannot be ignored. The advantages that transgender women may retain from male puberty is muscle mass, bone density, and cardiorespiratory endurance can create a difference that challenge the sports. Transgender individuals should not, under any circumstance, participate in any gender if they do not identify as their gender assigned at birth. Thank you.
Baylee, Allison, I just watched you overcome two of your greatest fears, writing a paper. Do hard things and do them very well.
Thank you.
So you talked about Trump, and that's what I was going to ask you about. You know, that sort of changed a lot of the direction your research was going. Why? I know that your focus was on transgender athletes in women's sports specifically, but did you find a lot of research where, you know, a lot of women are trying to compete in men's arenas?
I found one example, and her name is Schuler Baylee, and she was a Harvard swimmer, and she competed with the men in the championship. She won too. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good for her.
Excellent job
Thank you.
from your coach. So as a coach, either your opinion or what you have researched, why do some coaches even allow that someone like that on a team? For me, for example, I would never allow a transgender, that boy, to play on my girls' softball team. Is it more because they're afraid of the backlash? Are they winning is the most important thing to them, or do they just believe it's okay?
I think it's a combination of like them wanting to win and them like scared of getting backlash, and they don't want that. They want their team to win and just, yeah.
So they don't want to be on CNN.
Excellent job, Baylee.
Thank you.
It seems like Riley's picture of Emperor's New Clothes applies a lot to how people are responding to transgender, in addition to what you just said. As a 50-year-old, it seems outrageous that boys are allowed to play with girls. But I think with a lot of people your age, it's like, well, why shouldn't that kind of thing? I'm curious if you could speak to that reality just a little bit. As to why so many people your age are so open to that kind of thing.
Like allowing it?
Yeah.
I want to say it was kind of like how they were raised, and they just want to include everyone, and it kind of depends on the parents. Like if you're raised in a household where, oh yeah, we accept anyone for who they are, this and that, then of course the child is going to accept that as well because that's all they've known. But if you're raised in a household of that is completely unacceptable, if you were born a man, you should not be switching your gender to be a woman.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so, I guess, do you have any solutions in terms of like, if someone does transition or whatever, allowing them to play men's sports rather than women's sports, because it is a terrible advantage for women, but not so much if they want to play men's, that kind of thing. Just didn't know if you thought through possible solutions for people who were in that category, if that makes sense.
Actually, I did. I put a lot of thought in this question, actually. It's glad you asked that. If you were transgender, they should make their own league for that. Because it's completely unacceptable for a man to compete against a woman or play with a woman.
That's great, thank you.
Baylee. This is going to totally sound like a gotcha question, but it is not the heart
Okay.
of which I'm asking this.
Okay.
But it struck me when I was following with you in your paper, it seemed like you probably had to make a decision about this. Did you have to make a conscious decision about how the pronouns you use to describe transgender athletes? Because I noticed that you described Leah Thompson here as her, and the other person, Fallon Fox, that you have on the screen, you used that pronoun her. I'm just wondering, is that a conscious decision that somebody had to wrestle with?
I did for the Leah Thompson and the Fallon Fox, I did what the books called her. So that's just what I went off of. I would have fully said he, but because of the book and everything that I was reading said her, I just put her.
I figured there's a practical reason because of that, just for convenience sake, because it gets real clunky when you
It does.
use lots of different things. But it did strike me as really interesting that was there. I don't know. To me, this issue is always such a common sense kind of thing. It seems, and it's always surprising when that same kind of common sense is not shared among. Maybe I think that just because that's my viewpoint, but it seems like male and female is not the only way we categorize sports, right? So we categorize them amateur, professional. Yeah. We categorize them by, classes, the size of school, like in high school, Class B, Class C, Division I, whatever. We classify them based on conferences. We classify them by age, like if you're running a race, a foot race, like jogging or something, you get age divisions. It seems like we classify athletics in so many other ways. Maybe you can speak to, just as you've read more extensively than I have, having this, it seems so logical that how do you classify all these other ways, yet you blur the lines here. What's the logic, I guess, that flies in the face of common sense from kind of the opposite point of view, that they're willing to blur the lines here, but not in the face of there being categories in these other areas?
So I think I'm going to answer your question,
It's
but
I'm sorry.
I had a conversation with some of my classmates yesterday about it, and we said there are some sports like pool and chess that aren't physical.
Yeah.
So the physical, that's kind of self-explanatory, men should be competing, but against the chess and pool, it's not physical. So it's just all about skill.
I have a hypothetical. Your first narrative about the parents going to the meeting, that was a high school
Yes.
thing, wasn't it? Okay. So executive orders, we have no idea that the next president who comes in could sign an executive order and say whatever. Now that Providence is out of that MAIS league and we're in the LHSAA, if down the road, and I've learned at my age not to ever say never, but do you think Providence should compete against schools that do allow transgenders? Or would Lauren be upset at our Christian boycott if we did that?
I still say absolutely not. We shouldn't compete against a man. It's completely unfair advantage.
Okay, I have a question for you, Baylee. So in your paper, you talk about Blair Fleming, and I followed this story. I was just interested in what the school was going to do, so I'm gonna read it. Oh wait, here. Okay, so this story in particular. Okay, so you have that Blair Fleming is a transgender athlete who gained national attention for her performance on the San Jose State University on their volleyball team. And then you go on and it talks in this story, how you have it in your paper, you go into detail about Blair Fleming's teammates. And you have many of Fleming's teammates were not even aware that she was transgender. When they were made aware of this, there were feelings of betrayal, insecurity, and deception. And I wonder why coaches, or in this case, this university, they were very concerned about Blair Fleming and her right to play, and we disregard the feelings of everyone else on the team. And how do you reconcile that? I guess what I'm asking is, what about the teammates? What about everyone else?
I thought about it. It's Blair Fleming has the highest vertical that I've seen on researching this, and I believe that the coaches weren't necessarily trying to consider their feelings. They just wanted to win.
Yeah.
If there are no further questions, thank you.